Welcome to Story Planet, where every tale brings warmth and peace to your evening. Tonight, we journey to the heart of the American countryside for a cozy gathering at Rose Cottage. So, settle in, relax, and let the calm of this story wrap around you. Evening. Tea at Rose Cottage. Cradled in the heart of the American countryside, Rose Cottage had long been a sanctuary of comfort, tranquility, and enduring friendship. The cottage, with its weathered, clapboard walls and ivy-clad facade, stood at the end of a winding dirt road. Towering oaks and maples lined the path. Its small garden, bursting with fragrant roses, lavender, and a myriad of wildflowers, was a testament to the care and love lavished on it over the decades. Inside, the cottage exuded warmth, with its low-beamed ceilings, cozy nooks, and the welcoming scent of freshly baked biscuits and brewing tea. For years, Rose Cottage had been the meeting place for a group of lifelong friends: Margaret, Edith, Clara, and Beatrice. They had shared nearly every significant moment of their lives with one another. Every week, without fail, they would gather for their cherished evening tea. It was a tradition that had been maintained through all of life's changes, both big and small. As they aged, their gatherings became even more precious. It was a comforting constant in a world that seemed to change ever more quickly around them. As twilight began to settle over the landscape, painting the sky in hues of lavender and pink, Margaret prepared for the arrival of her friends. She moved about the kitchen with the ease of long practice. Her hands deftly sliced cucumbers for sandwiches, arranged delicate pastries on a tiered stand, and filled a blue and white teapot with freshly steeped Earl Grey. The kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of tea mingling with the scent of warm scones, butter, and jam. Margaret paused for a moment, glancing out the window toward the garden where the last rays of sunlight kissed the rose bushes. She smiled to herself, thinking of the many evenings spent here in the company of her dear friends. Each week they would gather around the old wooden table, now worn smooth with use. They would share the latest news, reminisce about the past, and simply enjoy the pleasure of one another's company. Soon, the familiar sound of tires crunching on the gravel path signaled the arrival of Edith. A tall woman with silver hair swept into a neat bun, Edith had a calm and dignified presence. She had been a school teacher for many years, and though she was now retired, the students still fondly remembered her kindness and gentle wisdom. "Good evening, Margaret," Edith called as she opened the garden gate. "The roses are looking lovely as ever." "Good evening, Edith," Margaret replied warmly, wiping her hands on her apron as she went to greet her friend. "Come inside. The tea is just about ready." Edith entered the cottage, her face lighting up as she breathed in the familiar, comforting sense of home. "It's always such a pleasure to be here, Margaret," she said, as she removed her coat and hung it on the wooden peg by the door. Margaret smiled as she led Edith into the sitting room, where the table was already set for tea. The fireplace crackled softly, its warmth adding to the cozy atmosphere. As the two women settled into their seats, there was a comfortable silence between them. It was the kind that only comes from many years of friendship. It wasn't long before Clara and Beatrice arrived, both of them slightly out of breath from their walk up the lane. Clara, with her twinkling blue eyes and mischievous smile, had been the life of the party for as long as anyone could remember. Even now, well into her 70s, she retained a youthful spirit and a sharp wit that kept everyone laughing. Beatrice, on the other hand, was quiet and reflective, with a soft voice and a gentle manner. She was the peacemaker of the group, always ready with a kind word or a thoughtful observation. "Sorry we're late," Clara said with a grin as she and Beatrice entered the cottage. "We got caught up admiring the sunset." "No need to apologize," Margaret replied, her eyes crinkling with affection. "You're just in time. Come, sit down, and let's have our tea." With everyone seated, Margaret began to pour the tea. The delicate clinking of china echoed softly in the room. The steam from the teapot curled into the air, carrying the fragrant scent of bergamot. The friends took their cups and plates, each helping themselves to the array of treats on the table. There were cucumber sandwiches, scones with clotted cream and strawberry jam, and an assortment of cakes and biscuits. As they began to eat, the conversation flowed naturally, as it always did. They spoke of the small town and its happenings. They talked of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, of books they had read and programs they had watched. The topics were varied, but the tone was always light and comforting, as if each word was a stitch in the fabric of their shared lives. "This reminds me," Edith said after a while, "of that summer we spent in Cape Cod all those years ago. Do you remember? The little cottage by the sea, the walks along the shore. It was such a lovely time." "Oh, I remember it well," Clara chimed in with a laugh. "Especially that day we nearly got caught in the tide because we were too busy collecting shells to notice it coming in." "How could we forget?" Beatrice added, her eyes twinkling at the memory. "We were soaked to the bone by the time we made it back to the cottage, but it was worth it for all the treasures we found." The laughter that followed was warm and rich. It filled the room with a sense of contentment that only deep friendship can bring. It was in these moments that the four friends felt most alive, connected by the threads of shared experiences and the understanding that comes from a lifetime spent together. As the evening wore on, the conversation turned more reflective, as it often did when the light began to fade and the first stars appeared in the sky. Margaret, who had always been the quietest of the group, found herself thinking about how much their lives had changed over the years. There had been joys and sorrows, gains and losses, but through it all, their friendship had remained a steadfast anchor. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if we hadn't met all those years ago?" she mused aloud, her voice soft. The others looked at her with gentle smiles, understanding the depth of her question. "I can't imagine it," Edith said after a pause. "Our lives are so intertwined now that it's hard to separate one from the other. We've shared so much, lived through so much together. It's what makes our bond so special." Clara nodded in agreement. "We've been through everything, haven't we? Love, loss, heartbreak, joy, and through it all we've had each other. That's what matters most." Beatrice, who had been quietly sipping her tea, added, "There's a comfort in knowing that no matter what happens, we'll always have this. Our friendship is something that time can't touch. It's like the roses in Margaret's garden. Every year they bloom again, just as beautiful as before." The others nodded, touched by Beatrice's words. It was true. Their friendship had blossomed and endured, much like the roses that surrounded them. It was a living, breathing thing, nurtured by their love and care for one another. Outside, the sky had deepened to a velvety indigo. The garden was bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. The cottage, with its warm lights and cozy interior, felt like a haven from the world outside. A place where time seemed to stand still. As the evening drew to a close, the friends lingered a little longer around the table, reluctant to part. They knew that these moments were precious, that each gathering was a gift to be cherished. Finally, it was time to say goodbye. Edith, Clara, and Beatrice rose from their chairs, wrapping themselves in their coats and scarves. Margaret walked them to the door, her heart full as she bid them good night. "Same time next week?" Clara asked with a grin as she stepped out into the cool night air. "Of course," Margaret replied with a smile. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." With a final wave, the three friends made their way down the garden path, their laughter echoing softly in the stillness of the night. Margaret watched them go, her heart swelling with gratitude for the love and friendship that filled her life. As she closed the door and returned to the empty sitting room, Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. The cottage was quiet now, save for the gentle crackling of the fire. She took a moment to tidy up, gathering the empty cups and plates and placing them on the kitchen counter. But before heading to bed, Margaret paused by the window. She looked out at the garden bathed in moonlight. The roses, though no longer in bloom, stood tall and proud. Their branches were silhouetted against the night sky. It was a reminder that even in the quiet, dormant times, there was life and beauty waiting to emerge once more. With a contented sigh, Margaret turned off the lights and made her way upstairs to her bedroom. As she climbed into bed, she thought about her friends. She reflected on the years they had shared and the memories they had created together. There was a comfort in knowing that, no matter what the future held, they would always have their evening tea at Rose Cottage. And with that thought, she closed her eyes. The calm and contentment of the evening washed over her. Outside, the world continued to turn, but within the walls of Rose Cottage all was still, peaceful and filled with the quiet joy of friendship. Thank you for joining us at Story Planet. We hope this tale brought a touch of warmth to your evening. If you enjoyed your time in Rose Cottage, you may consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more peaceful journeys. Until next time, may your nights be calm and your dreams sweet.